What kind of man rises from a remote island in the Mediterranean and commands the greatest armies in Europe? What kind of man defeats kings, redraws borders, crowns himself emperor, and dares to challenge the entire continent? And what kind of man marches into the frozen heart of Russia with 600,000 soldiers and watches his empire collapse in the snow? This is not simply a story of war. It is a story of ambition, brilliance, power, and consequence. This is the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. Corsica had only recently been conquered by France. He was not born into wealth. He was not born into power. His family held a minor noble title, but they struggled financially. At the age of 9, he was sent to mainland France to study at a military academy. There, he was mocked for his Corsican accent. He was isolated. He was considered an outsider. He had few friends. Instead of surrendering to humiliation, he withdrew into study. He devoted himself to mathematics, artillery science, and military history. He read about Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. He studied how small forces defeated larger ones. He learned that war was not chaos. War was calculation. Then the French Revolution erupted in 1789. The monarchy fell. The king was executed. Europe declared war on revolutionary France. The French army was in turmoil. Experienced officers fled or were purged. In that chaos, opportunity appeared. Napoleon was young, disciplined, and technically brilliant. At the siege of Toulon, he repositioned French artillery to dominate the harbor instead of attacking blindly. The British fleet withdrew under heavy fire. Napoleon was 24 years old. He was promoted to brigadier general. His rise was rapid because he delivered results. He understood logistics. He understood speed. He understood morale. In 1796, he was given command of the Army of Italy. The army was starving and poorly equipped. Morale was low. Napoleon addressed them directly. He promised them victory, honor, and prosperity. He told them that they would march into rich lands and defeat powerful enemies. He then transformed the way they fought. Instead of moving as one slow mass, he divided his army into flexible units. He moved rapidly between enemy forces. He struck isolated targets before they could unite. He attacked unexpectedly. He maneuvered relentlessly. Within 1 year, Austria was forced to negotiate peace. Napoleon had defeated armies larger than his own through speed and concentration of force. Europe began to fear him. In 1798, he attempted to disrupt British trade by invading Egypt. The campaign was bold but strategically limited. The British Navy destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Napoleon returned to France, but his reputation survived. His political influence grew. In 1799, he seized power in a coup. He became first consul of France. He consolidated authority. He reformed administration. He stabilized the economy. He created the Bank of France. He reconciled with the Catholic Church. In 1804, he made a decisive statement. Inside Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, in the presence of Pope Pius VII, Napoleon crowned himself emperor. He did not allow the Pope to place the crown upon his head. He took it himself. It was a declaration that power flowed from his will, not from tradition. In 1805, he faced a coalition of Austria and Russia at the Battle of Austerlitz. He deliberately weakened his right flank to lure the enemy into attack. When Allied forces advanced, he launched a concentrated strike through their weakened center. The enemy army collapsed in a matter of hours. It was considered his greatest tactical victory. At his height, Napoleon dominated continental Europe. He reorganized territories. He placed loyal rulers on thrones. He introduced the Napoleonic Code, which established equality before the law and ended feudal privileges. His legal reforms influenced nations far beyond France. However, one opponent remained unconquered. Britain controlled the seas. Unable to invade the island, Napoleon attempted economic warfare. He implemented the continental system, forbidding European nations from trading with Britain. The policy strained alliances. Russia resisted. Tensions grew. In 1812, Napoleon assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen. More than 600,000 soldiers marched into Russia. It was a demonstration of overwhelming power. The Russian army avoided decisive battle. They retreated steadily. They destroyed crops and supplies behind them. They forced Napoleon deeper into hostile territory. When he finally reached Moscow, the city was largely abandoned. Soon after, fires consumed much of it. There was no surrender. There was no peace offer. Winter approached rapidly. Temperatures dropped to extreme levels. Supply lines stretched beyond repair. Horses died by the thousands. Soldiers froze during the night. Starvation and disease spread through the ranks. The retreat from Moscow became one of the greatest military disasters in history. Of the 600,000 who began the campaign, only a fraction returned. Napoleon's aura of invincibility vanished. European powers united once again. In 1813, he suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Leipzig. By 1814, Allied forces entered Paris. Napoleon abdicated the throne. He was exiled to the island of Elba. For most leaders, exile would have marked the end. For Napoleon, it became an intermission. In 1815, he escaped from Elba and returned to France. Troops sent to arrest him instead joined him. He regained control of the government in what became known as the 100 Days. European powers responded immediately. They mobilized for a final confrontation. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon faced British and Prussian forces at the Battle of Waterloo. Heavy rain delayed his artillery. Mud slowed movement. Coordination faltered. Prussian reinforcements arrived at a critical moment. After a day of intense fighting, the French army broke. This defeat was final. Napoleon surrendered to the British. He was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean. There, isolated from Europe and stripped of power, he spent his remaining years reflecting on his life and legacy. He died in 1821. Napoleon reshaped Europe. He transformed military strategy through speed, mobility, and concentration of force. He modernized legal systems. He inspired both loyalty and resistance. He demonstrated how talent and determination could overturn centuries of tradition. Yet his story also revealed the limits of ambition. His greatest strength, relentless confidence, became his greatest weakness. His drive to dominate led him into a campaign that destroyed his army and shattered his empire. Napoleon Bonaparte rose from obscurity to command a continent. He crowned himself emperor. He defeated coalitions of kings. He rewrote the rules of warfare. But in the end, even genius could not overcome distance, winter, and united opposition. He conquered nations. He changed history. And he left behind a legacy that still shapes the modern world.